I walked into my childhood home on Christmas Eve, expecting the familiar warmth of holiday traditions, but instead found my father Harold sliding an itemized bill across our dining room table like a contract demand. $8,800 for a luxury Mediterranean cruise. The number glared at me from crisp white paper, while my family sat in calculated silence around our decorated table. My father's voice cut through the festive atmosphere as he explained I would fund this vacation for my sister Madison's twin daughters, ages 12 and 14. The cruel twist landed like a physical blow when I realized I wasn't invited on this trip, just expected to pay for it. The weight of that bill transported me instantly back to every Christmas morning of my childhood, when Madison's pile of presents towered over mine like a monument to parental favoritism. I remembered being 14 years old, watching my sister unwrap her third expensive gift, while I carefully folded the wrapping paper from my single present to reuse next year. That same sinking feeling now churned in my 32-year-old stomach as I stared at this financial demand. Harold leaned back in his chair with the satisfaction of someone who believed he held all the cards. At 58, my father carried himself with the authoritative bearing of his former career as an insurance executive, his gray hair perfectly styled and his holiday sweater deliberately casual, yet expensive. He'd always treated family interactions like business negotiations, and tonight felt no different. "Bennett, you're successful and childless," he announced with clinical detachment. "These girls deserve experiences you never had to sacrifice for." The irony burned through me like acid. I'd worked construction summers throughout high school and college, coming home with calloused hands and aching muscles, while Madison spent her breaks at the country club pool. I'd eaten ramen noodles for months to afford textbooks, while she received a fully funded education at a private liberal arts college. At 16, I'd saved every dollar from my grocery store job to buy a used Toyota Corolla with 130,000 miles, while Madison received a brand new Honda Civic with a red bow on her 18th birthday. My mother, Patricia, sat quietly at the far end of the table, her hands folded tightly in her lap. At 56, she still carried the gentle demeanor that had made her beloved as an elementary school teacher, but I could see the discomfort etched across her features. She avoided my eyes, focusing intently on the Christmas centerpiece she'd spent hours arranging. Madison, now 29, watched this unfold with barely concealed smugness. Her divorce from Derek 6 months ago had left her living in our parents' guest house, with her twin daughters working part-time at an upscale boutique downtown. She'd mastered the art of looking perpetually overwhelmed while never quite taking full responsibility for anything in her life. "The girls have been planning this for months," Madison interjected, her voice taking on that practiced tone of maternal sacrifice. "Emma and Sophie have never been anywhere outside Colorado. They've been researching Mediterranean history for their school projects, learning about ancient Rome and Greek mythology. This isn't just a vacation, Bennett. It's educational." I looked across the table at my nieces Emma and Sophie, who sat quietly, picking at their dessert. At 12 and 14, they were good kids, caught in circumstances they didn't create or understand. They'd grown up expecting abundance, because it had always materialized around them, funded by a combination of their grandfather's favoritism and child support from their father in Seattle. "When exactly did I agree to pay for this?" I asked, keeping my voice level despite the anger building in my chest. Harold's expression hardened as he reached for his phone, scrolling through his photo gallery with deliberate slowness. "I promised them 6 months ago," he said, turning the screen toward me. The images showed Emma and Sophie surrounded by travel brochures, their faces bright with excitement as they planned excursions to Rome, Barcelona, and the French Riviera. They've been learning Italian phrases and researching shore excursions. They even started a scrapbook. The manipulation was expertly crafted, every detail designed to make me appear selfish for questioning this financial ambush. I could see the careful orchestration behind it, all the way my family had positioned themselves as victims of my potential refusal, rather than perpetrators of financial extortion. "You make 6 figures in software development." Harold continued his insurance executive persona in full display. You live alone in a downtown Denver loft, drive a luxury car, take expensive ski trips. What's $8,000 to someone with your resources? These girls need family support, and you're the only one positioned to provide it. The guilt trip felt familiar, a refined version of childhood dynamics, where my success was always framed as something I owed to the family, rather than something I'd earned through my own efforts. But this time felt different, more calculated and aggressive than the subtle favoritism of my youth. Madison leaned forward, her expression shifting to practiced vulnerability. Derek hasn't been consistent with child support since the divorce. The girls are adjusting to so many changes, and this trip would give them something positive to focus on. Something magical to remember from this difficult time in their lives. I noticed she didn't mention that Derek's inconsistency stemmed from her own financial demands that went well beyond the court-ordered support. I'd heard through family gossip that she'd been requesting additional money for everything from designer school clothes to expensive electronics, often bypassing official channels in favor of guilt-inducing phone calls. The cruise leaves in 6 weeks. Harold added, producing another document from his folder. I've already made the deposit and selected the staterooms. This is just your portion of the total cost. My portion. As if I'd been consulted or included in any of these decisions. As if my role in this family had been reduced to that of a silent financial backer for everyone else's dreams and desires. I looked around the table at faces I'd known my entire life, searching for any sign of genuine affection or consideration for my feelings. Instead, I saw calculation, expectation, and that particular brand of family entitlement that transforms love into obligation and generosity into debt. The Christmas tree lights twinkled in the background, casting colored shadows across holiday decorations that now felt like props in an elaborate performance designed to extract money from my bank account. The smell of my mother's traditional sugar cookies, usually comforting, now seemed cloying and manipulative. I need time to think about this, I said, finally folding the bill and slipping it into my jacket pocket. Harold's face darkened with the expression I remembered from childhood moments when his authority was questioned. There's nothing to think about, Bennett. Family obligations aren't optional. These girls are counting on you. The coordinated assault on my resolve began the very next morning. I woke up in my downtown Denver loft to find 17 text messages from Madison, each one containing photos designed to maximize emotional impact. Pictures of Emma and Sophie researching cruise activities on the family computer, their faces glowing with anticipation. Images of handwritten lists detailing shore excursions they wanted to experience, complete with childish drawings of ancient Roman architecture and Mediterranean beaches. By noon, my phone had become a weapon of psychological warfare. Madison sent videos of the twins practicing basic Italian phrases, their voices bright with excitement as they stumbled through buongiorno and grazie mille. Each message came with commentary designed to twist the emotional knife deeper. The girls stayed up until midnight last night, planning their itinerary. Emma wants to visit the Colosseum, and Sophie is obsessed with seeing the Trevi Fountain. They're learning so much history already. You should see how engaged they are with their studies now that they have something concrete to look forward to. I set my phone aside and tried to focus on work, but my concentration was shattered when my mother called during my lunch break. Patricia's voice carried that particular tremor that had always preceded her most effective guilt trips, a combination of maternal disappointment and barely contained tears. Bennett, honey, I don't understand what's happening to our family. She began, her words carefully chosen for maximum emotional impact. Your father worked so hard, his entire career, to provide for all of us. And now that he wants to do something special for his granddaughters, you're tearing us apart. The irony wasn't lost on me. Harold had indeed worked hard, but his provisions had always flowed disproportionately toward Madison, while I was expected to be grateful for the crumbs that remained. Now that his retirement savings were apparently insufficient for his grandiose gestures, I was being recruited as the family's permanent financial solution. Mom, I wasn't even consulted about this trip. I replied, trying to keep my voice gentle, despite my frustration. The first I heard about it was when Dad handed me a bill at Christmas dinner. That's not how family decisions should work. But you're so successful, sweetheart. She continued, her teacher's voice, taking on that tone she'd once used to encourage struggling students. You have opportunities and resources that the rest of us don't. Shouldn't we share our blessings with family? Isn't that what Christmas is really about? The conversation lasted 45 minutes, during which Patricia masterfully wove together themes of family unity, Christian generosity, and the fleeting nature of childhood. By the time I hung up, I felt emotionally drained and increasingly isolated from people I'd once considered my primary support system. That evening, Harold appeared at my apartment building without warning or invitation. I found him in the lobby examining the modern architecture and expensive finishes with the calculating eye of someone appraising assets. He'd dressed deliberately casual, but expensively, his leather jacket and designer jeans, sending a clear message about his expectations regarding my lifestyle and spending capacity. Nice place, he commented as I reluctantly invited him upstairs. What's the monthly rent here? $3,400. I didn't answer, but Harold's real estate background allowed him to make educated guesses as he toured my loft with uninvited familiarity. He paused at my home office, noting the dual monitor setup and high-end computer equipment that supported my software development consulting business. Business must be good, he observed, settling into my living room with the confidence of someone who believed he had every right to be there. I've been thinking about our conversation yesterday, and I realize I may not have fully explained the complete scope of what we're planning. Harold produced a leather portfolio from his jacket, spreading additional documents across my coffee table, like a financial advisor presenting investment options. The itemized breakdown now included shore excursions, specialty dining packages, spa treatments for Madison, and upgraded accommodations. The total had ballooned from $8,800 to nearly $12,000. Madison deserves some relaxation time too. He explained, his tone suggesting this expansion was perfectly reasonable. She's been under tremendous stress with the divorce and single motherhood. A few spa treatments and nice dinners will help her recharge, so she can be a better mother to the girls. The audacity was breathtaking. Not only was I expected to fund a vacation I wasn't invited to attend, but I was now being asked to subsidize my sister's luxury treatments while she enjoyed a Mediterranean cruise with her daughters. The entitlement was so complete, so assumed, that Harold presented it as if I were being unreasonable for not immediately agreeing. Dad, this is getting out of hand, I said, trying to maintain some semblance of family diplomacy. I never agreed to any of this, and these costs keep growing. What started as a family vacation has turned into an expensive indulgence that you expect me to finance without any input or consideration. Harold's expression shifted to that familiar mixture of disappointment and paternal authority that had shaped my childhood. Bennett, I'm concerned about what success has done to your character. You used to be a generous, family-oriented young man. Now you're quibbling over money when your niece's happiness is at stake. The psychological manipulation was expertly crafted, transforming my reasonable objections into character flaws, while positioning his financial demands as moral imperatives. It was the same dynamic that had governed our family relationships for decades, but now amplified by much larger sums of money and more sophisticated guilt tactics. As Harold packed up his documents, he dropped one final piece of information that sent chills through my system. Madison has already been shopping for cruise outfits and accessories. She's charged about $2,000 to her credit cards, figuring you'd cover the expenses once you saw how important this trip is to everyone. The girls have been telling their friends and teachers about the vacation too. Emma even volunteered to give a presentation about Italian culture when she gets back. The implication was clear. The financial and emotional investment had already been made regardless of my consent. Refusing to pay would not only disappoint my nieces, but potentially damage Madison's credit and create social embarrassment for children who'd innocently shared their excitement with peers. After Harold left, I sat alone in my apartment trying to process the elaborate web of obligation and manipulation that my family had constructed around me. The city lights of Denver stretched out beyond my windows, but I felt more trapped than I had since childhood. Every escape route seemed blocked by guilt, family pressure, and the innocent expectations of two young girls who had no idea they were being used as emotional leverage in an adult financial dispute. My phone buzzed with another message from Madison this time, a video of Emma and Sophie trying on new swimsuits they'd purchased for the cruise. Their genuine excitement was heartbreaking, because they had no understanding of the adult dysfunction surrounding their anticipated vacation. They were simply children looking forward to their first international adventure, caught in circumstances they didn't create and couldn't control. I realized that my family had placed me in an impossible position, where any decision I made would cause pain to people I loved. Paying would validate and encourage future financial manipulation, but refusing would hurt innocent children and potentially damage relationships I'd hoped to preserve. The sophistication of the emotional trap was remarkable in its cruelty, designed to make resistance feel selfish, regardless of its underlying justification. I called my best friend Ryan the next morning, needing perspective from someone outside the family dysfunction that was consuming my judgment. Ryan Martinez had been my roommate in college and was now a successful divorce attorney with 15 years of experience, untangling complicated family financial situations. If anyone could help me see this clearly, it was him. "Bennett, what you're describing sounds like a classic pattern of financial abuse," Ryan said after I'd outlined the situation over coffee at our usual spot downtown. "I see this constantly in divorce cases, where one party systematically exploits the other's sense of obligation or guilt. The fact that it's happening within your birth family doesn't make it less abusive." Ryan's perspective cut through the emotional fog that had been clouding my thinking. As a 34-year-old attorney who'd built his career on protecting people from financial manipulation, he recognized patterns that I'd been too emotionally invested to identify clearly. "Let me ask you some questions." He continued, pulling out a legal pad and shifting into his professional mode. "Has your family ever made significant financial requests of Madison? Do they expect her to contribute equally to family expenses or emergencies? When your parents need home repairs or medical expenses, do they ask both children to contribute proportionally?" The questions hit like physical blows, because the answers revealed the systematic inequality I'd been trained to accept as normal. Madison had never been expected to contribute financially to anything. When Harold needed a new roof 2 years ago, I'd been asked to help with half the cost, while Madison's potential contribution was never even discussed. When Patricia required expensive dental work, I'd received a detailed explanation of the costs and a request for assistance, but Madison had been shielded from any knowledge of the financial strain. Ryan took methodical notes as I described decades of financial dynamics, his expression growing more serious with each example. "Your family has groomed you to be their permanent ATM," he said bluntly. "They've established a pattern where your success creates obligation, while Madison's struggles create exemption. That's not healthy family support, Bennett. That's exploitation." My phone buzzed with another message from Madison this time, photos of cruise outfits she'd purchased with the assumption I'd reimburse the costs. Ryan glanced at the images and shook his head grimly. "She's spending money she doesn't have, based on your assumed consent," he observed. "That's a manipulation tactic designed to create artificial urgency around your decision. If you don't pay now, you become responsible for her debt and credit problems." The calculated nature of the manipulation became clearer as Ryan helped me analyze each element of the pressure campaign. Every photo, every message, every family member's involvement had been strategically designed to maximize my sense of obligation while minimizing my ability to refuse without appearing heartless. "I want you to meet someone," Ryan said, pulling out his phone. "Sarah Collins is a pediatric nurse at Denver Children's Hospital. She's also my girlfriend, and she has experience with families where financial dynamics become unhealthy. I think her perspective would help you understand the long-term impact on your nieces if this behavior continues unchecked. That evening, Ryan arranged for the three of us to meet for dinner at a quiet restaurant, where we could talk without interruption. Sarah was 30 years old, with the kind of practical wisdom that comes from working with children and families in crisis situations. Her profession had taught her to recognize unhealthy family dynamics and their impact on child development. "What you're describing concerns me from a child welfare perspective," Sarah said, after I'd explained the situation. "Emma and Sophie are learning that love is transactional, that family relationships are based on financial exchange rather than genuine affection. They're also learning that manipulation and emotional pressure are acceptable ways to get what you want from people." Sarah's insights forced me to consider consequences I hadn't previously examined. These girls are being taught that Uncle Bennett exists to fund their desires without question or consultation. What happens when they become adults and encounter people who won't accept that kind of manipulation? What happens when they try to use these same tactics in their own relationships? The conversation continued late into the evening, with Sarah sharing examples from her nursing experience of families where financial dynamics had created long-term emotional damage. Children who grew up in environments where money was used as a tool of control often struggled with healthy relationship boundaries as adults. My neighbor, Mrs. Chen, knocked on my door the next morning with a plate of homemade cookies and the kind of gentle concern that comes from observing young people navigate difficult family situations. At 67, she was a retired social worker who'd spent her career helping families establish healthy boundaries around money and emotional manipulation. "I couldn't help but notice your father's visits," she said, settling into my kitchen with the easy familiarity of someone who'd become a trusted friend over the 3 years I'd lived in the building. "You seem troubled lately, Bennett. Sometimes it helps to talk with someone who's seen many family financial struggles." Mrs. Chen listened without judgment as I explained the crew's situation, nodding occasionally, with the understanding of someone who'd encountered similar dynamics countless times in her professional career. When I finished, she was quiet for several minutes before speaking. "In my 40 years of social work, I learned that families often confuse enabling with loving," she said thoughtfully. "When parents consistently rescue one child from consequences while expecting the other to solve financial problems, they create a dynamic that hurts everyone involved. The rescued child never learns responsibility. The responsible child becomes resentful, and the parents lose credibility with both." Her wisdom carried the weight of decades spent helping families navigate these exact situations. Mrs. Chen had seen the long-term consequences of financial manipulation disguised as family loyalty, and her assessment was sobering. That afternoon, Ryan called with news that transformed my understanding of the entire situation. His legal connections had allowed him to run some basic financial background checks, and what he'd discovered explained the desperation behind my family's increasingly aggressive tactics. "Bennett, your father has been financially supporting Madison far beyond what you realize," Ryan said, his voice carrying the gravity of someone delivering serious news. "I found evidence of multiple large transfers from his accounts to hers over the past 3 years. We're talking about amounts that total over $80,000. The information hit me like a physical blow. While I'd been working to build my own financial security, Harold had been systematically draining his retirement savings to fund Madison's lifestyle. The crew's demand wasn't about giving his granddaughters a nice vacation. It was about finding a way to continue supporting Madison without completely bankrupting himself and Patricia. There's more," Ryan continued. "Your parents' house has a second mortgage that was taken out 18 months ago. Based on public records, they're leveraging their primary asset to maintain cash flow. Your mother's recent return to work isn't about staying active in retirement. It's about basic household expenses." The full scope of the financial deception began to crystallize. Every guilt trip about my success, every manipulation about family obligation, every pressure tactic had been designed to mask the reality that Harold had been financially enabling Madison to the point of jeopardizing his and Patricia's security. My phone rang as Ryan was explaining the implications. It was Madison, and for the first time, Desperation had crept into her usually confident voice. "Bennett, I need to tell you something important." She said, her words coming faster than usual. "The cruise line called today, asking about payment arrangements. Apparently, Dad used some of your personal information when he set up the booking. I think there might be some confusion about who's responsible for the charges." The call ended abruptly, leaving me staring at my phone with a growing sense of dread. Ryan's expression had shifted to professional alarm as he processed what we'd just heard. "Bennett, if your father used your personal information to set up cruise payments without your knowledge or consent, that could constitute identity theft," he said, already reaching for his legal pad. "We need to find out exactly what information was used and how your credit might be affected." The credit report arrived via email 2 hours later, confirming my worst fears. Harold had somehow obtained my social security number and used it to establish a payment plan with the cruise line, putting the entire $12,000 vacation package on a financing arrangement under my name. My credit score had already dropped 15 points, and I was legally liable for the full amount, plus interest and administrative fees. Ryan's law office became my command center as we began building a response to what had clearly become criminal behavior. His paralegal, Jennifer Walsh, specialized in identity theft cases and immediately recognized the severity of the situation. "This isn't just family manipulation anymore," she explained, spreading documents across Ryan's conference table. "Your father has committed multiple felonies, identity theft, fraud, and financial exploitation. The fact that you're related doesn't change the legal reality of what's happened." The emotional weight of potentially sending my own father to jail created internal conflict I'd never experienced. Growing up, Harold had been difficult and manipulative, but he'd also been the person who taught me to throw a baseball and helped with homework when I struggled in school. The idea of filing criminal charges against him felt like crossing a line I'd never be able to uncross. Detective Maria Santos from the Denver Police Department's Financial Crimes Unit arrived at Ryan's office that afternoon to take my statement. At 41, she carried herself with the professional competence of someone who'd spent 15 years investigating complex fraud cases, and her experience with family financial crimes was immediately apparent. "What you're describing is unfortunately very common," Detective Santos explained as she reviewed the evidence we'd compiled. "Adult children exploiting elderly parents financially has reached epidemic proportions. But we also see cases where parents manipulate their successful adult children through identity theft and emotional coercion." Her perspective helped me understand that I wasn't dealing with an isolated family problem, but rather a recognized pattern of criminal behavior that required legal intervention. Detective Santos had seen dozens of similar cases where family loyalty was weaponized to prevent victims from seeking protection. "The psychological component is often the most challenging aspect of these investigations," she continued. "Victims struggle with feelings of guilt and betrayal because they feel they're abandoning family members who need help. But what you need to understand is that by not holding them accountable, you're actually enabling behavior that will ultimately harm everyone involved." Ryan scheduled an emergency consultation with James Washington, a certified financial planner who specialized in credit repair and identity theft recovery. At 45, James had built his practice around helping people rebuild their financial lives after family members had damaged their credit through unauthorized use of personal information. "The cruise line debt is just the beginning," James warned as he reviewed my credit profile. "Once someone has your social security number and personal information, they can potentially open credit cards, apply for loans, or make other financial commitments in your name. We need to implement comprehensive identity protection immediately." The credit monitoring service James recommended revealed additional unauthorized inquiries that suggested Harold had been considering other financial arrangements using my information. The pattern indicated systematic preparation for ongoing financial exploitation rather than a single desperate act. My phone buzzed constantly with increasingly frantic messages from Madison, but the tone had shifted from manipulation to genuine panic. She'd apparently realized that her financial house of cards was collapsing, and that the legal consequences could extend far beyond a canceled cruise. "Bennett, please call me back," her latest voicemail pleaded. "I know this situation has gotten complicated, but we're family. We can work this out without involving lawyers or police. The girls don't understand what's happening, and they're asking why everyone seems upset about their vacation." The mention of Emma and Sophie created fresh emotional turmoil. These children had done nothing wrong, but they were about to become collateral damage in a legal battle that would reshape our entire family structure. Their innocent excitement about the cruise would soon transform into confusion and disappointment as adult conflicts destroyed their anticipated adventure. Sarah joined me for dinner that evening, providing emotional support as I processed the day's revelations. Her nursing background had taught her to remain calm during family crises, and her perspective helped ground me as I navigated decisions that would have permanent consequences. "You're protecting more than just yourself," she reminded me as we walked through downtown Denver after dinner. "If you don't establish boundaries now, this pattern will continue and escalate." Emma and Sophie need to learn that actions have consequences, even when those actions are taken by adults they trust. That night, Patricia called in tears, begging me to reconsider legal action against Harold. Her voice carried genuine despair as she described the impact on their marriage and family relationships. "Your father made mistakes, but he's not a criminal," she pleaded through her sobs. "He's been under tremendous pressure trying to help Madison and the girls, and he made poor decisions because he felt desperate. Can't we find a way to handle this privately within the family?" The conversation lasted over an hour, with Patricia alternately accepting responsibility for enabling Harold's behavior and defending his actions as misguided attempts to help his granddaughters. Her emotional pain was genuine, but I realized that protecting her feelings would ultimately perpetuate the dysfunction that had created this crisis. The next morning brought an unexpected development that complicated an already complex situation. Derek, Madison's ex-husband, called from Seattle with information that shifted my understanding of the entire family dynamic. "Owen, Bennett. I've been getting calls from my daughters about this cruise situation." Derek said, his voice carrying the weariness of someone who'd been dealing with Madison's financial chaos for years. "I need you to know that Madison has been telling Emma and Sophie that you've already agreed to pay for the trip. She's been using your supposed generosity to justify additional purchases and promises." Derek's insights revealed another layer of manipulation that I hadn't previously understood. Madison had been using my anticipated financial contribution as leverage in her own spending decisions, essentially spending money she didn't have, based on assumptions about my eventual cooperation. "There's something else you should know," Derek continued. "I've been documenting Madison's financial instability for potential custody modifications. Her inability to manage money responsibly is affecting the girls' security, and I'm concerned about their long-term welfare in her care." The custody implications added urgency to an already complicated situation. If Madison's financial problems escalated to criminal charges or bankruptcy, Derek might pursue full custody of Emma, and Sophie, potentially separating them from their mother entirely. My legal action intended to protect myself might inadvertently contribute to breaking up their family unit. Ryan helped me understand that I was facing multiple competing interests that couldn't all be satisfied simultaneously. Protecting myself legally might harm Madison's custody situation. Protecting the children's relationship with their mother might enable continued financial manipulation. Maintaining family relationships might perpetuate criminal behavior and financial abuse. "You can't control all the outcomes," Ryan advised as we prepared for a meeting with Detective Santos. "Your responsibility is to protect yourself legally and establish healthy boundaries. Other people's reactions to those boundaries are their responsibility, not yours." The weight of holding my family's future in my hands felt overwhelming. Every decision I made would ripple through multiple lives, affecting not just my own financial security, but also my parents' marriage, my sister's relationship with her children, and my niece's sense of family stability. Detective Santos called that afternoon with news that transformed the investigation's scope. Her preliminary research had uncovered evidence that Madison had been forging Harold's signature on financial documents for several months, suggesting a pattern of fraud that extended beyond the cruise payment arrangement. We found bank records showing multiple large withdrawals from your father's accounts with signatures that don't match his usual handwriting, she explained. Your sister has apparently been accessing his funds without proper authorization, which constitutes elder financial abuse, in addition to the identity theft charges related to your situation. The discovery meant that Madison, not Harold, was likely the primary architect of the financial manipulation that had been occurring. My father, while complicit in the cruise payment scheme, was apparently as much a victim of Madison's deception as I was. This revelation forced me to reconsider everything I thought I understood about the family dynamics. Harold's desperate attempts to fund Madison's lifestyle hadn't been enabling behavior. They'd been responses to systematic financial theft that he might not have fully recognized or understood. Armed with Detective Santos's evidence of signature forgery and unauthorized account access, I decided to confront Madison directly before the situation spiraled completely out of control. Ryan accompanied me to her apartment, serving both as legal counsel and emotional support, as we prepared for what would likely be the most difficult conversation of my adult life. Madison lived in a converted garage apartment behind our parents' main house, an arrangement that had always seemed temporary, but had stretched into permanent dependency. The small space was cluttered with expensive purchases that told the story of someone living far beyond her means: designer handbags, high-end electronics, and clothing that cost more than many people's monthly rent. When I knocked on her door that Tuesday afternoon, Madison answered wearing a new outfit that probably cost more than most people spent on groceries in a month. Her initial expression of casual confidence quickly shifted to wariness as she noticed Ryan's presence and the serious look on both our faces. Madison, we need to talk about the financial arrangements you've been making. I began, trying to keep my voice steady, despite the anger and betrayal I felt. I know about the forged signatures, the unauthorized withdrawals, and the cruise payment plan you convinced Dad to set up using my personal information. Her face went through a series of rapid changes: surprise, denial, calculation, and finally, resignation. For several seconds, she stood in the doorway, looking like someone whose elaborate lie had finally been exposed and who was trying to decide whether continued deception was possible. I don't know what you're talking about, she said initially, but her voice lacked conviction. Dad handles all the financial arrangements for the family. If there are problems with paperwork, that's not my fault. Ryan stepped forward with the calm authority of someone accustomed to confronting people who'd been caught in criminal behavior. Madison, we have bank records showing multiple forged signatures and unauthorized transactions. We also have evidence that you've been accessing your father's accounts without proper authorization. This is criminal behavior, regardless of your family relationships. The legal terminology seemed to break through her denial, and Madison's composure finally cracked. She invited us inside, her hands shaking, as she cleared expensive purchases from the couch to make room for us to sit. The small apartment felt cramped and claustrophobic as she began to pace, her usual confident demeanor replaced by obvious panic. You don't understand the pressure I've been under, she said, her voice rising with desperation. Derek has been threatening to take the girls if I can't prove I'm financially stable. I lost my good job 6 months before the divorce was finalized, and the boutique work barely covers basic expenses. I've been trying to hold everything together for Emma and Sophie, but nothing I do seems good enough. The admission opened floodgates of information that painted a picture far more complex than the simple entitlement I'd assumed motivated her behavior. Madison had been living in constant fear of losing custody of her daughters, making increasingly desperate financial decisions to maintain the appearance of stability and prosperity. The credit cards started as emergency funds. She continued, tears beginning to flow as months of suppressed anxiety finally found expression. Just temporary help until I got back on my feet. But the interest rates were brutal, and minimum payments kept growing faster than my ability to cover them. When Derek started making noise about custody modifications, I panicked. Ryan took careful notes, as Madison described a downward spiral that had been hidden from the family for months. Her part-time boutique job paid barely $1,500 a month, while her expenses between rent, car payment, insurance, and basic living costs for 3 people totaled over $3,000. The mathematical impossibility of her situation had driven her to increasingly desperate measures. Dad offered to help, but his retirement savings weren't unlimited. She explained, her voice breaking with genuine distress. I knew he and Mom were struggling too, but I was terrified of what would happen if Derek proved I couldn't provide for the girls financially. So when Dad's help wasn't enough, I started accessing his accounts when he wasn't looking. The forgery had begun small. Madison explained, just enough to cover emergency expenses when her father's voluntary support fell short of her needs. But as her debt continued to grow, and Derek's custody threats became more specific, her financial manipulation had escalated to systematic theft. The cruise idea came from Dad. She insisted, perhaps trying to deflect some responsibility for the current crisis. He wanted to do something special for Emma and Sophie, something that would show Derek that we could provide enriching experiences. But when the costs started adding up, and I realized Dad didn't have enough in his accounts, I suggested using Bennett's information for the payment plan. Ryan's expression hardened, as Madison described convincing Harold to commit identity theft by framing it as a temporary financial arrangement that I would eventually agree to once I understood the benefits to my nieces. She'd apparently convinced her father that this was a reasonable family financial strategy rather than criminal behavior. I never meant for it to become this complicated. Madison continued, her tears now flowing freely. I thought Bennett would see how happy the girls were and just agree to help. I thought we could work it out as a family without involving lawyers or police. I never intended to hurt anyone. The childlike quality of her reasoning was striking. Despite being a 29-year-old mother, Madison seemed to have no realistic understanding of legal boundaries or financial consequences. Her decisions had been driven by emotion and desperation, rather than rational planning or consideration for others' rights. Madison, what you've described constitutes multiple serious crimes, Ryan explained with professional directness. Identity theft, forgery, and elder financial abuse can result in significant prison time, especially when the amounts involved reach tens of thousands of dollars. Your good intentions don't change the legal reality of what you've done. The mention of prison seemed to finally penetrate Madison's emotional fog, and she looked at me with genuine terror in her eyes. Bennett, please, you can't let them arrest me, she begged. What would happen to Emma and Sophie if I went to jail? They've already been through so much with the divorce. Losing their mother, too, would destroy them. Her plea created the exact emotional dilemma she'd been exploiting throughout this crisis. Even after learning the full extent of her criminal behavior, I was being asked to prioritize her welfare and that of her children over my own legal protection and financial security. Ryan's phone buzzed with a call from Detective Santos, who had news that would further complicate an already devastating situation. Derek had contacted the Denver police with information about Madison's financial instability, apparently as part of building his custody case, and had inadvertently triggered an investigation into potential child endangerment related to her debt situation. Your ex-husband is in Denver, Ryan told Madison after taking the call. He's meeting with Child Protective Services this afternoon to discuss concerns about the children's welfare in your care. Detective Santos thinks he may be planning to file for emergency custody based on financial instability and criminal behavior. Madison's face went white as the implications sank in. Her financial manipulation, originally motivated by fear of losing her daughters, had apparently created exactly the situation she'd been trying to avoid. Derek now had documented evidence of criminal behavior that would likely support his custody claims in family court. The timing was devastating. Just as Madison was forced to confront the legal consequences of her actions, she was also facing the potential loss of the children those actions were meant to protect. The irony was cruel, but inevitable, given the self-destructive nature of her financial decisions. "There's one more thing you need to know," Madison said quietly, her voice barely audible through her tears. "I haven't just been taking money from Dad's accounts. I've been accessing Mom's personal savings too, the account she's been building for their retirement travel. She doesn't know yet, because I've been intercepting the bank statements." The revelation that Patricia was also a victim of Madison's financial crimes added another layer of betrayal to an already complex situation. My mother's recent return to work wasn't just about helping with household expenses. It was unknowingly replacing money that Madison had been systematically stealing from her personal retirement savings. I sat in Madison's cramped apartment surrounded by the evidence of her financial lies, trying to process the complete destruction of everything I'd believed about my family. The sister I'd resented for her privilege had actually been a desperate criminal. The parents I'd thought were enabling her had actually been victims of her manipulation. The family financial pressure I'd experienced had been based on systematic theft rather than legitimate need. Ryan's legal expertise helped structure our conversation toward practical solutions rather than endless recrimination, but the emotional damage felt irreparable. Trust that had been built over decades had been shattered in a single afternoon, replaced by legal obligations and criminal investigations that would reshape our family permanently. As we prepared to leave Madison's apartment, she made one final desperate plea that revealed the depth of her misunderstanding about the consequences of her actions. "Can't we just pay everything back and forget this happened?" she asked, apparently believing that restitution could somehow undo criminal behavior. "I'll get a better job, pay back every penny, and we can pretend none of this ever occurred. The girls never have to know about the legal problems if we handle it quietly within the family." Ryan's expression was kind but firm, as he explained why criminal behavior couldn't simply be resolved through family negotiation. "Madison, you've committed felonies that are now under investigation by law enforcement. The decision about charges and prosecution isn't Bennett's to make anymore. This has moved beyond family conflict into criminal justice territory." The conversation ended with Madison sobbing in her apartment, while Ryan and I walked back to his car in heavy silence. The December air felt sharp and cleansing after the emotional intensity of the confrontation, but I knew that nothing would ever be simple or comfortable about my family relationships again. The emergency family meeting that Detective Santos arranged for the following morning felt like a tribunal where decades of dysfunction would finally be judged and sentenced. Patricia sat quietly next to Harold in the conference room at Ryan's law office, her face showing the devastation of someone who'd just learned that both her children and husband had been systematically deceiving her. Harold looked like he'd aged 5 years in the past week. The confident authority he'd always projected had been replaced by the hollow expression of someone who'd realized his enabling behavior had contributed to criminal activities that now threatened to destroy his entire family. Detective Santos reviewed the evidence, methodically explaining how Madison's financial crimes had escalated from desperate measures into systematic theft that had victimized every family member. The total amount involved exceeded $90,000 when all unauthorized transactions were calculated, an amount that qualified for enhanced criminal penalties under Colorado law. The identity theft charges related to Bennett's credit are just one part of this investigation, Detective Santos explained. "We're also looking at elder financial abuse forgery and fraud charges related to the unauthorized access to Harold and Patricia's accounts. The district attorney's office will ultimately decide which charges to file, but the evidence supports multiple felony convictions." Ryan had spent the night developing a comprehensive legal strategy that addressed everyone's interests while establishing accountability for the criminal behavior. His proposal was complex, but offered the best chance of protecting both my legal rights and the family's long-term stability. Bennett is willing to consider dropping the identity theft charges against Harold in exchange for complete financial transparency and a structured restitution plan, Ryan explained. However, this agreement depends on Madison's willingness to accept responsibility for her actions and submit to court-supervised financial counseling and addiction treatment for compulsive spending. The treatment component was crucial, according to James Washington, the financial counselor who joined our meeting. Madison's spending behavior shows classic signs of addiction, where financial decisions are driven by emotional impulses rather than rational planning. Without professional intervention, she'll likely repeat these patterns regardless of legal consequences. Patricia finally spoke her teacher's voice, carrying the weight of someone who'd spent decades helping troubled students, but had failed to recognize similar problems in her own family. "I should have noticed the missing money sooner," she said, her words heavy with guilt. "I trusted Madison when she offered to help with banking and bill paying, but I should have maintained better oversight of our accounts." Harold's admission was equally painful to witness. "I thought I was helping my granddaughters by supporting Madison financially," he said, his insurance executive confidence completely gone. "I never realized that my assistance was enabling criminal behavior. I failed as both a father and a grandfather." The family therapy component that Ryan recommended was essential for rebuilding relationships based on honesty rather than manipulation. Dr. Rebecca Martinez, a family counselor who specialized in financial dysfunction, explained how enabling behavior often created the very problems families were trying to solve. Harold's financial support allowed Madison to avoid facing the consequences of her poor decisions. Dr. Martinez observed, "Bennett's resentment about unequal treatment was actually a healthy response to an unhealthy dynamic. The whole family needs to learn new ways of expressing love that don't involve financial rescue or obligation." Derek arrived from Seattle that afternoon, with his attorney prepared to file for emergency custody, based on Madison's criminal behavior and financial instability. His presence added urgency to negotiations, since any resolution would need to address his legitimate concerns about his daughter's welfare. "I don't want to separate Emma and Sophie from their mother," Derek explained during a private conversation with Ryan and me. "But I can't ignore criminal behavior that puts my children at risk. If Madison gets help and demonstrates real change, I'm willing to maintain our current custody arrangement. But that requires accountability and supervision, not family cover-ups." Sarah joined us for dinner that evening, providing emotional support as I processed the day's complex negotiations. Her nursing experience with troubled families helped her understand the long-term implications of the various resolution options we were considering. "The children's welfare has to be the priority," she reminded me as we walked through downtown Denver after our meal. "Emma and Sophie didn't choose any of this, but they'll live with the consequences of whatever decisions are made. They need stability and honesty, not continued dysfunction disguised as family loyalty." The resolution that finally emerged required compromises from everyone involved, but it offered the best chance of protecting the children while establishing accountability for the criminal behavior. Madison would plead guilty to reduce charges in exchange for supervised probation, mandatory financial counseling, and regular reporting to family court about her compliance with restitution payments. Harold and Patricia would attend family therapy to address the enabling behaviors that had contributed to the crisis, and they would implement court-supervised financial oversight to prevent future manipulation. Their house would be protected from further financial damage through a trust arrangement that prevented Madison from accessing their assets. My role in the resolution was both generous and self-protective. I established an education trust fund for Emma and Sophie that would be managed by an independent third party, ensuring their future security while preventing the funds from being misused for immediate expenses. The trust would cover legitimate educational costs and emergencies, but Madison would have no direct access to the money. The restitution plan required Madison to repay the stolen money through a structured payment program that would take several years, but wouldn't financially destroy her ability to care for her daughters. She would need to maintain steady employment and submit monthly financial reports to the court, ensuring ongoing accountability. Derek agreed to maintain the existing custody arrangement provided. Madison complied with all court requirements and demonstrated sustained financial responsibility. His willingness to work with the family resolution, rather than pursuing full custody, was crucial for keeping Emma and Sophie with their mother. The cruise was canceled, and all fraudulent charges were reversed through the identity theft reporting process James Washington helped me navigate. My credit score would recover within 6 months, and comprehensive identity monitoring would prevent future unauthorized use of my personal information. 6 months later, the family dynamics had transformed completely. Madison was working full-time as a medical office administrator while attending evening classes to complete her college degree. Her financial counseling had helped her understand the connection between emotional stress and spending impulses, and she developed healthy coping mechanisms for managing both. Harold and Patricia's marriage had strengthened through therapy as they learned to communicate about financial decisions and support each other without enabling destructive behavior. Patricia had returned to substitute teaching by choice rather than financial necessity, and their retirement security was slowly being rebuilt. Emma and Sophie had initially been disappointed about the canceled cruise, but they'd adapted to their family's new financial reality with the resilience children often show. Their trust fund gave them security for their educational future, and they'd learned valuable lessons about money management and personal responsibility. My relationship with Sarah had deepened through the crisis, as she'd supported me through the most difficult family situation I'd ever faced. Her wisdom and stability had helped me maintain perspective during emotionally overwhelming circumstances, and our shared experience had strengthened our bond significantly. The camping trip I took Emma and Sophie on that summer was modest compared to a Mediterranean cruise, but it created genuine bonding experiences that expensive vacations couldn't have provided. We hiked in Rocky Mountain National Park, cooked meals over a campfire, and had conversations about family responsibility and the difference between wants and needs. The transformation wasn't immediate or easy, but it was real and lasting. As I write this story, 18 months later, my family has rebuilt itself on a foundation of honesty and mutual respect rather than manipulation and financial obligation. The crisis that nearly destroyed us ultimately became the catalyst for healthier relationships based on genuine affection rather than guilt and enablement. Madison completed her probationary period successfully and has maintained steady employment while rebuilding her credit and paying restitution. Her relationship with money has fundamentally changed through counseling, and she now makes financial decisions based on realistic planning rather than emotional impulses. She's proud of her independence and no longer expects family members to rescue her from the consequences of her choices. Harold has become a different kind of grandfather, offering emotional support and wisdom to Emma and Sophie rather than financial solutions to every problem. His relationship with Madison is stronger because it's based on respect for her growth rather than pity for her struggles. He's learned to express love through presence and guidance rather than money and material gifts. Patricia has found her voice in family financial discussions and no longer enables destructive behavior in the name of keeping peace. Her return to teaching has given her purpose beyond family caretaking, and she's developed friendships and interests that don't revolve around managing other people's problems. She's proud of the boundaries she's learned to maintain. Emma and Sophie have adjusted to their family's new financial reality with remarkable grace. They've learned to distinguish between needs and wants, to appreciate experiences over possessions, and to understand that family love doesn't depend on expensive gifts or lavish vacations. Their trust fund gives them educational security without spoiling them or creating unrealistic expectations. Derek has been supportive of Madison's transformation and has maintained the custody arrangement that keeps his daughters with their mother. His willingness to give Madison a chance to prove her changes were genuine has been crucial for maintaining family stability while ensuring his children's welfare remains protected. My relationship with Sarah has grown stronger through our shared experience of navigating family crisis together. She helped me understand that protecting myself legally wasn't selfish, but necessary for building authentic relationships based on respect rather than exploitation. Her wisdom and support were invaluable during the most difficult period of my adult life. The education trust fund I established has been used appropriately for legitimate expenses, like tutoring school supplies and enrichment activities that support Emma and Sophie's development. The independent management ensures the money serves its intended purpose, while teaching the girls that financial support comes with responsibility and accountability. My own financial security has been restored and protected through comprehensive identity monitoring and legal safeguards that prevent future unauthorized use of my personal information. The credit damage from Harold's fraud has been completely reversed, and my relationship with money has become healthier through understanding the difference between genuine family support and financial manipulation. The life lesson that emerged from this painful experience is profound and lasting. True family love never demands financial sacrifice without consent, consideration, or reciprocity. Healthy relationships are built on mutual respect and voluntary generosity, not guilt manipulation or assumed obligation. Setting boundaries isn't selfish when those boundaries protect everyone involved from destructive patterns. I learned that enabling destructive behavior, even with good intentions, ultimately harms the people you're trying to help. Madison needed to face consequences for her actions to develop genuine responsibility and self-respect. Harold and Patricia needed to stop rescuing her to preserve their own financial security and force her to grow as an adult. The crisis taught me that family loyalty doesn't require accepting abuse or criminal behavior. Protecting yourself legally and financially can actually be an act of love when it forces everyone involved to develop healthier patterns of interaction. Sometimes, the most caring thing you can do is refuse to participate in dysfunction, even when that refusal creates temporary pain or conflict. Emma and Sophie learned that money doesn't equal love, that family relationships should be based on genuine affection rather than financial exchange, and that adults who truly care about children will protect them from manipulation rather than using them as emotional leverage. These lessons will serve them well in their own adult relationships. The camping trip we took together was worth more than any cruise because it represented authentic family bonding based on shared experience rather than expensive consumption. The girls remember our conversations around the campfire, the wildlife we observed, and the challenges we overcame together far more clearly than they would have remembered luxury cruise amenities. Today, family gatherings are genuine celebrations, rather than opportunities for financial manipulation or guilt trips. We talk honestly about challenges and successes, support each other emotionally, and make decisions together based on mutual consideration rather than assumed obligation. The trust between us has been rebuilt through consistent actions rather than manipulative words. My success is no longer viewed as a family resource to be exploited, but as an individual achievement to be respected. When I choose to help family members financially, it's voluntary and appreciated, rather than demanded and expected. The difference in family dynamics is remarkable and refreshing. The courthouse where we finalized Madison's restitution agreement has become a symbol of accountability rather than punishment. Justice was served not through destruction, but through structured consequences that protected everyone involved while creating opportunities for genuine growth and change. Sarah and I often reflect on how this crisis, while painful, ultimately brought clarity to all our family relationships. We learned who could be trusted with our vulnerabilities, who respected our boundaries, and who was willing to do the hard work of changing destructive patterns, rather than simply demanding that others accommodate them. The story ends not with dramatic revenge or devastating consequences, but with the quiet satisfaction of healthy boundaries maintained and authentic relationships restored. Sometimes, the most powerful victories are measured not in what you gain, but in what you refuse to lose: your self-respect, financial security, and the right to be treated with consideration rather than exploitation. Christmas this year was the first in decades where I felt genuinely welcomed, rather than financially targeted. The gifts were modest, the expectations realistic, and the conversations honest. Emma and Sophie were happy with thoughtful presents, rather than expensive ones, and their gratitude was genuine. because they understood the difference between generosity and obligation. The most important lesson from this entire experience is that you teach people how to treat you by what you're willing to accept. When you allow financial manipulation to continue unchallenged, you enable the very behavior that damages relationships and hurts the people you love. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do is refuse to participate in dysfunction, even when that refusal feels difficult or unpopular. My family's transformation proves that people can change when they're held accountable for their actions and supported in developing healthier patterns. The crisis that nearly destroyed us became the foundation for rebuilding relationships based on respect, honesty, and genuine care for each other's welfare, rather than selfish exploitation disguised as family loyalty. If you've experienced similar family financial manipulation, remember that you have the right to protect yourself legally and financially, regardless of blood relationships. Setting boundaries isn't cruel. It's necessary for everyone's long-term welfare. Sometimes loving someone means refusing to enable their destructive behavior, even when that refusal creates temporary conflict or disappointment. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where family members expected you to fund their choices without consulting you first? How do you think you would handle discovering that loved ones had been using your personal information to make financial commitments without your knowledge? I'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you or helped you think about your own family financial dynamics, please consider liking this video and sharing it with others who might benefit from understanding the difference between genuine family support and financial manipulation. Your engagement helps these important conversations reach people who need to hear them. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories about navigating complex family relationships, setting healthy boundaries, and protecting yourself from financial abuse, while maintaining the connections that truly matter. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it helps you build stronger, healthier relationships based on mutual respect rather than obligation. Remember that your financial security and emotional well-being matter just as much as anyone else's in your family. You deserve relationships built on love and respect, not guilt and exploitation. I wish you the wisdom to recognize the difference and the courage to protect what truly matters in your life.